Entry number 054. Location: Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, US. Date: active 1829 to present. Subject: institutional resonance. Some buildings remember what happened inside them. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 1829. America was young. Its justice system was still finding its shape, and in the shadow of a growing city, a radical experiment in punishment was about to begin. Eastern State Penitentiary. It was not designed as a place of torture, not in the traditional sense. The architects called it a penitentiary, from the word penitence. The goal was reform, solitude, reflection, a chance for the prisoner to look inward, confront his sins, and emerge cleansed. But the human mind was not built for absolute isolation, and the walls of Eastern State did not just hold bodies, they held something else. The architect, John Haviland, designed Eastern State as a wheel, a central rotunda, the center, with 7 cell blocks radiating outward like spokes. From above, it looks almost beautiful, a monument to order, to control. Inside, each cell was a stone box, running water, a skylight, and nothing else. No human contact, no conversation, no sound, except the distant echo of footsteps and the occasional howl of wind through the corridors. Inmates wore hoods when they were moved from their cells to the exercise yards, so they could not see the faces of their guards or fellow prisoners. They were not allowed to speak, not allowed to sing, not allowed to weep. At least, not where anyone could hear. The theory was that silence would lead to remorse. The reality was different. Decades of solitary confinement produced hallucinations, paranoia, and a particular kind of madness. The madness of a mind forced to invent company because no real company existed. Some inmates carved faces into the stone walls just to have something to look at. Others scratched prayers into the floor, prayers that were never answered. Eastern State operated for 142 years. By the time it closed in 1971, it had housed over 75,000 prisoners, and according to those who have walked its corridors since, not all of them left. On the second floor of the old women's cell block, a section of the prison reserved for the most vulnerable, the most forgotten, visitors have reported a pale figure drifting through the shadows. She is known as the Soap Lady. Her form is indistinct, a shape in white, a glow, thin, eerie, almost translucent, that moves through the dark as if the darkness does not slow her. Witnesses describe her as searching, running her hands along the stone walls, peering into empty cells, retracing steps she must have taken 1,000 times in life. Some believe she was an inmate who died in this cell block, her body found days later, unclaimed, unnamed, her identity lost to the prison's indifferent records. Others say she was a patient in the prison's hospital wing, a woman who suffered from a skin condition that caused her flesh to break down, earning her the nickname that has followed her into death. Regardless of her origin, those who have seen her report the same sensation: cold air, a faint smell of lye soap, and the overwhelming feeling of being looked at, even when the figure has its back turned. She does not speak, she does not attack, but her presence is unmistakable. And when she passes through a wall, which she does, often as if stone is no barrier to her, witnesses are left staring at empty darkness, wondering if they imagined her at all. L. Capone's Torment, Cell Block 9, the most famous resident of Eastern State, Al Capone. The gangster was sentenced to Philadelphia for carrying a concealed weapon, a minor charge for a man who had ordered murders. But the prison was not lenient with him. He was given a cell, solitary confinement, the same treatment as every other inmate. Unlike others, Capone had resources. His friends on the outside furnished his cell with fine furniture, oriental rugs, and a radio. He lived, by all accounts, in relative comfort for a prison. But comfort did not protect him from what visited at night. Guards reported hearing Capone screaming in his cell, screaming at someone named Jimmy. Records suggest Jimmy was a member of the North Side Gang, a rival of Capone's, who was murdered during the St. Valentine's Day massacre in 1929. Capone believed Jimmy's ghost had followed him to prison. On multiple occasions, he begged the guards to move him to another cell. He claimed Jimmy stood at the foot of his bed, staring at him, saying nothing, just watching. The guards checked the cell. It was empty, always empty. But Capone did not stop screaming until he was transferred out of Eastern State. Even the most powerful man in the criminal underworld was reduced to a terrified witness, trembling in a stone box, alone with something he could not bribe, intimidate, or escape. The center and the guards. The heart of Eastern State is the rotunda, the central hub from which all cell blocks radiate. It was designed as a surveillance point. Guards could stand in the center and see down every corridor simultaneously. Total visibility, total control. But the dead do not respect sight lines. Visitors to the rotunda have reported seeing a shadowy silhouette at the periphery of their vision, a figure standing where no living guard stands. It watches, it paces, it moves along the same route, again and again, as if still performing a shift that ended decades ago. Witnesses describe the presence as wrong, not angry, not sad, but fundamentally out of place, a crack in the ordinary, a seam between the living world and whatever exists alongside it. Some researchers believe this is a residual haunting, an echo of a guard who walked this route so many times that the memory of his footsteps was pressed into the stone. Others believe he is still there, still watching, still waiting for something, an end to his shift perhaps, or permission to leave. Neither explanation is comforting. Cell Block 4, the locksmith's burden. Perhaps the most visceral account from Eastern State comes from a man who was not a paranormal investigator. He was a locksmith, hired to restore a lock on a cell door in Cell Block 4, a lock that had not turned in decades. He was in the cell alone. The door was open behind him. He was focused on his work. Then the weight descended. He described it as invisible, an unseen pressure that pinned him to the floor, crushing his chest, making it impossible to breathe. He could not move, could not cry out, could only lie there, gasping, as something held him down. And then he saw the walls, faces, dozens of them, hundreds, blooming out of the stone like photographs developing in chemical bath, faces in agony, faces twisted in screams he could not hear, faces of men who had spent years, decades in this cell, alone, forgotten, mad. The faces did not speak. They did not move. They simply were, pressed into the limestone like fossils of suffering. The locksmith does not know how long he lay there. Minutes, perhaps. Hours. When the pressure lifted, he ran. He did not finish the job. He has not returned to Eastern State. His account is not a ghost story. It is not a haunting in the traditional sense. It is a testimony of memory, not the memory of a single soul, but the accumulated pain of hundreds, pressed into the stone like water into a sponge. And when the conditions are right, when the air is cold, when the building is quiet, when a living person stands in the wrong place at the wrong time, that memory leaks out, and it remembers everything. The chorus of whispers. Throughout the rest of Eastern State, From cell block 12 to the deep basement pits where the worst offenders were kept, visitors consistently report the same phenomenon. Whispers, not words exactly, not language that can be transcribed, but sound, a susurrus, a murmur, a chorus of voices speaking simultaneously just below the threshold of comprehension. Some witnesses have heard giggles, high-pitched, childlike, emerging from empty cells where no child was ever held. Others have heard weeping, deep, racking sobs that seem to echo from the walls themselves. And some have heard their own names, not shouted, not called, whispered from a dark corner, from the stairwell, from the space just behind their shoulder. Investigators have recorded electronic voice phenomena in nearly every cell block, snippets of speech that were not audible at the time of recording but appear clearly on playback.
Help me.
Help me.
Get out.
Get out.
Cold.
Cold.
Sorry.
Sorry. The whispers do not threaten. They do not chase, but they follow. And those who have heard them often report a lingering sensation, days later, weeks later, of being watched, of something waiting in the periphery, of a voice, barely audible, speaking their name when no one else is in the room. Eastern State Penitentiary is now a museum. You can walk its corridors, stand in its cells, see the crumbling plaster, the rusted bars, the skylights that once offered prisoners their only view of the sky. Most visitors leave with photographs, souvenirs, memories. Some leave with more. The prison was designed to reform, to reflect, to break the spirit down and rebuild it in solitude. But the spirit is not so easily controlled, and the spirits that remain at Eastern State do not seek revenge. They do not seek justice. They simply seek company. Because after decades of isolation, even the presence of the living is better than being alone. The cell blocks are open to the public. The locks have been restored. The whispers continue. If you visit, do not go alone. And if you hear your name whispered from an empty cell, do not answer. They have been waiting a long time to speak to someone new.
Help me, help me, help me, help me, help me. I can't. Help me, help me, help me, help me.